Support for this episode comes from Dexcom. One of the things we love the most about the Dexcom G6 is that it helped Benny become more independent, but maybe not in the way you're thinking. I mean, remote monitoring using the Dexcom Share and Follow let us be more confident letting him do more away from home with friends or at camp. But just the design change of G6 meant Benny could use one hand to insert the sensor. He was 14, he didn't want our help anymore. It was perfect timing. Dexcom G7 is even more simple to use and gives effortless diabetes management that fits into your lifestyle without the disruptions. Ease of use helps everybody, and I'm grateful the Dexcom product designers kept that in mind with G7. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, traveling with diabetes gives you enough to think about, especially traveling internationally, preparing, packing, going through airport security. But if you travel out of your country, not just the US, you also have to be aware of something called geofencing. If you use Dexcom's G7 and something goes wrong with your phone or the app, getting it back is going to be an issue. We'll talk about how this works, why it's in place, and what you can do about it. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of Diabetes Connections. I'm your host, Stacey Sims, and you know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. If you are new around here, a little bit about me. My son lives with type 1 diabetes. He was diagnosed right before he turned 2. Back in 2006, he is now 19. My husband lives with type 2. I don't have diabetes, but I have a background in broadcasting, and that is how you get the podcast, which we started back in 2015. I also host Mom's Night Out events. Those are for moms of kids with diabetes and also for women with type 1. We're finding more and more adults with type 1 are coming to these events, which is fantastic. Our next event is in Denver. That's September 20th. Then we will be in the Philadelphia area, October 25th, and announcing more cities after that. If you're interested, just go to diabetes-connections.com, click on the Mom's Night Out tab, or you can ping me on social media or email. We'd love to have you. These events are so much fun. All right, our main topic this week is a known issue with Dexcom's G7. It's not widely known, perhaps, but I did ask about this in an interview last year, and I was under the impression that it was going to be quickly resolved, or at least that somebody traveling who encountered this issue would be able to quickly resolve it themselves. Before we go any further, this is a good place for my usual disclaimers. Yes, Dexcom is a sponsor of this podcast. You have already heard their ad. While we are partners in that way, they don't tell me what to cover in the podcast in terms of content. They do know I'm doing this episode because, as you'll hear, I asked them for a statement and they gave me one. I just think it's really important to make those boundaries known. Longtime listeners are probably sick of hearing about it, but I always like to point it out. Benny just switched over to the G7 about a month ago, and we haven't been out of the country since, so I have no firsthand knowledge or experience with this one. My guest is going to explain it in more detail, but the basics. If you travel out of your home country and you have an issue with your Dexcom G7 app or your phone, you lose it, it's stolen, it breaks, it can be difficult, if not impossible, to get the G7 app back and working. It's worth noting that geofencing in general is there for a reason. Different countries have different approvals for different features. So basically, geofencing makes sure that you only see the features within the G7 app that are approved for use where you live in your country of residence. And that makes sense, as we know that the US FDA and European regulatory agencies do approve different features. But as we rely more and more on closed-loop systems, losing your app when you're out of the country is more than a convenience issue. My guest this week is the incredible Joanne Milo, diagnosed with type 1 more than 60 years ago. She's the founder of the popular Loop and Learn group, which is all about getting the most out of DIY diabetes systems. Joanne is passionate about a lot of things when it comes to diabetes, but I'd say she really wants to make sure people with diabetes have control over their devices and their situation as best as possible. And when this issue popped up, her group was very much on top of it. By the way, I did reach out to Dexcom for a statement, and I will read that to you after the interview. During the interview, I recap what they've already told me. So there's a lot going on here, and you'll hear from Joanne Milo right after this. Life is busy, and managing diabetes is a daily, sometimes hourly commitment. Well, EdgePark can help you say goodbye to the worry of managing your diabetes supplies with a variety of cutting-edge insulin delivery systems from brands like Medtronic and Tandem. Plus, EdgePark accepts most insurance plans and handles the paperwork, so you can simplify your life, your diabetes care, and your budget in one click. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the EdgePark logo. Joanne, welcome back. It's always great to talk to you. Thanks for jumping on to talk about a pretty important issue.
Thank you, Stacey. It's great to be back with you. Thanks.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm glad to have you. Let's jump in. Can you explain what the issue is with Dexcom geofencing international travel? What's going on here?
Absolutely. This all has to do with Dexcom G7 and the Dexcom G7 app. The term here is geofencing. What they have added from the G6 now in the G7 is that you are restricted in certain things when you travel outside of your home country. So I'll explain what that is immediately. If you are traveling, if you have an account with Dexcom in your home country and you travel any place else other than your home country, and one of two things can happen, your phone breaks, you lose it, it's been pickpocketed, or you get that dreaded message that no one seems to be talking about that says your Dexcom app has failed, uninstall the app and reinstall. If those two situations happen and you're traveling internationally, what I'm hoping is that people are aware and prepared that it is not an easy fix and they will not be able to just reinstall an app. If they go buy a new phone in a foreign country, they will not be able to reinstall easily. And what that means is people will be without the G7 app, which means the only things they can do is use their receiver. So if you're on a closed loop system, you'd have to input your data constantly. It will not get its data automatically from your phone. It's a serious issue. It's a long shot that it would happen, but it has happened to people. They've had to cancel vacations. They've scrambled to get their data. It has really impacted people. And my hope is that if you are traveling, that you are at least aware of the potential that you could have a problem and what the possible solutions are until Dexcom steps up and tells people. They have been aware of this issue at least for a year, and we've talked to them and recently again said, what are you doing to alert the community and how are you fixing the documentation? And they're not doing anything right now to alert the community. So hopefully we do help our own people be aware and what they can do.
Okay, lots of questions though, before we move forward. My first question is, when this happens, so your Dexcom app doesn't work. I say all this with the caveat that I do not use any system. I don't have diabetes. My son does. My son is 19. I don't see anything anymore. I don't know how to use anything anymore like I used to. So I just want to put that out there because these questions might sound really dumb. But the first thing I think of is if your Dexcom app isn't working on your phone, your closed loop system is still chugging right along, right? This doesn't affect the insulin dosing, right? Or does it?
If you use a closed loop system that depends on data from your CGM, all dosing is based on what your blood sugar is and the trend that's going on. So if you are not getting that flow of data from your Dexcom app,
But there's no system, Joanne, that goes Dexcom transmitter to cell phone to pump, right? Omnipod 5 is transmitter to pump. T-Slim is transmitter to pump. Loop is loop transmitter.
It doesn't stop. If your app goes away, the data doesn't flow. So you are no longer from your sensor getting data to your phone. You put in a new app, which you have trouble doing in a foreign country.
No, I understand. So in other words, I'm just trying to think of the practicalities because I'm trying to think of who this would affect.
It does not affect anyone with T-Slim.
Okay.
Because the app is built into their pump. So if their pump is gone, they have bigger problems. And then they have to get that solved with Tandem.
Of course.
It is not entirely clear whether it will impact Mobi users because, again, they need their phone to run their Mobi. So if their phone goes away, they will have problems. If the app goes away, I don't know where the app resides. If it resides on the phone and the app fails, which it has been doing, you will not get the flow of data.
Listen, and again, I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm just trying to dial down and figure out where the problem is here.
What I understand from Insulet, and they too have not clarified, I've gone to the technical people and they haven't responded. They require data from the CGM, that they require that. So if the app is not working, they say it is not geofenced, but if you're not getting data from your app, it's unclear to us how the Omnipod.
Sure. And no screen. So you definitely need your phone. Whether that would go away when the Dexcom app fails is a different story.
I understand iLet has the app on the phone, on the pump. So that is also not geofenced. I was in touch with Eversense on their CGM. They say it's not geofenced. The issue becomes, where does the app reside?
Yeah.
And what happens if the app goes away? And there are some workarounds, and it requires a little bit of planning, but I think people should have the right to know what those plans are, because you can do that if you plan to be traveling.
Yeah, 100%. Right. Bring a receiver, at least know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not really familiar with this, but I did ask about it last fall because a listener, Carol, asked me to ask Jake Leach from Dexcom about this issue. So we did talk about it with him. And then back at the time, he said, and I will link up the episode and I'll link up the text here because I'm not going to read everything he said. But he said, you basically just call our tech support and they will help you out. They will solve the problem for you. So I guess the question is tech support not helping here? Or do people just not know to call them? What have your folks been telling you?
I'm sorry he said that, because I don't think that's accurate. And several of us in my groups have called tech support and they get different answers. We also approached Jake a year ago, and at that time he said they were working on a fix. We approached him this year in June, said they are working on a fix by the end of the year and also correcting their documentation, which doesn't tell you what you can do if you lose your app out of your own home country. And we've heard nothing back for a month now. And my concern is this is height of travel season. People are traveling all over the world, and people have reported that their app fails or their phone was pickpocketed or something happens and they are not able to access their G7 data onto their closed loop systems. So there are some workarounds that require just a little bit of planning. This seems to be something that Dexcom should be addressing publicly to people so they are prepared. It did not exist in the G6, and it's important to understand that. Let me see if I can give you the answer from Jake in June was that the G6 is different. It is a unique app compiled for every country around the world, located in a unique country app store, so it doesn't require us to configure based on the country of residence of the Dexcom user account, like G7 does, because the G7 is a single global app. So it's the same in every store in the world, but it's based on your home location only. So that's where the problem is. I understood it was less expensive to do the G6 fix on it. I'm so sorry, but I wish they hadn't gone that way because it puts us at risk, and I don't like that. He also went on to say that this is required by regulatory agencies when they decided to use a single global app. I just don't know enough technically, and I don't know about the regulatory agencies, so I can't speak to that. My only care is that people who live with diabetes don't have any more burden and get stranded without their data.
Yeah. And, we talked about pumps a couple of minutes ago, but, many, many people use a Dexcom device who don't use an insulin pump and rely on it for dosing, or don't use an automated system and rely on it for dosing. So as you listen, please don't think I'm dismissive at all. I'm just trying to clarify, as Joanne is, right, where these right cases are and where these issues are. Do you know, is it an issue for people in other countries who travel to the US as well, or travel to any other country? Right back to our conversation. But first, Diabetes Connections is sponsored by Gvoke HypoPen. Gvoke HypoPen is a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above. If you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you're at risk for your blood sugar going too low. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready to treat very low blood sugar with Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more. Go to gvokeglucagon.com/Stacy. That's gvokeglucagon.com/STACEY. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on top of your kidneys called pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk for safety information.
Yes, it can happen to anyone leaving their home country. And so there are some fixes, but we've found some interesting glitches in even those fixes. And of course, we don't have a budget to go traveling and test it all out, but I can tell you what the fixes are, and then
please.
and see if it applies to everyone. It's not a difficult, but it could be a costly fix. If you use a G7 and you're going to be traveling, you can switch back to a G6 with a transmitter and the G6 app. It works flawlessly. It is not a problem anywhere in the world. But what that requires is you can pay for the G6 sensors, and insurance might not let you switch back and forth. The transmitter times out after 90 days. So you're wasting a transmitter if you only need it for 2 weeks on your vacation. And the app, if it goes away, you're okay on the G6, you're not on the G7. That's a real good fix. It just has a little costly back end to it. And several people in my community have figured out how to get a hold of some G6s and brought them just in case. You can also use the G7. If you're a G7 user, you can bring the receiver with you. You will continue to get data on your receiver. It just won't Bluetooth to your closed loop system. So your vacation gets impacted because you have to enter blood sugar data. It doesn't get trends the way it would normally get that. But in a pinch, it's a way to solve it.
I'm listening and I'm thinking, do we even have a receiver? With a G7?
No, they're not. Not many people do have that. I don't know if Dexcom is prepared to send people G7 receivers. They should be. I wish they would allow people to borrow a transmitter for a G6 so that in the olden days, I'm sorry, I'm dating myself, but in the olden days, if you traveled and you had an insulin pump, very often the pump company would give you a backup pump so that while you were traveling and it failed, you wouldn't be without a pump. It would be wonderful if they could give people transmitters for the time of their travel period, but I don't hear that being offered as a solution. Now we can get a little more technical, and there are VPNs, which are virtual private networks. I am not terribly technical. I understand you can download for free a VPN and set up your Dexcom G7 app. The technical people tell me it's easy. Why you'd want to be doing this on your vacation when you're, traveling the seas and you have to figure out a VPN, but it is a solution. However, from what we're understanding, particularly in some of the Arab countries, these are illegal. So you might not be able to do that. There is one more option that you can use, and again, it's very technical, which is BYODA, Build Your Own Dexcom app. And it works for Android phones. So if your phone gets pickpocketed, you can go into a store anywhere you are in the world, buy a cheap Android phone, and build your own Dexcom app.
I'm sorry. I know. So there's 25 people listening going, Stacey, this is so easy. You have no idea. And the rest of us are like, oh my gosh.
Yes, I don't want to be doing this.
I'm not building my own Dexcom app.
On the VPN option, you do need access to a laptop or a computer and the internet. So if you're on a cruise on a sailboat, I don't know that you will have that with you. So it's not the simplest solution. It is a solution.
Yeah. I'm just thinking we went to Costa Rica this past January and Benny was still using the G6. Didn't think twice. No, I'm smart. Who knew? I didn't think anything about it. It's interesting to think because there's a large cohort of people, many of whom are listening, 2 of which are on this call, who remember life way before Dexcom. Right. And we made it work and we muddled through and we did everything we were supposed to do. And I say we because at that time, my son was very small. So yes, it's not my diabetes, but boy, when you're taking care of a 2-year-old, it might as well be at that point. So I don't think this is a small thing by any stretch of the imagination. And yes, we could muddle through and figure it all out and do okay with finger sticks, but we shouldn't have to.
We should at least be aware. We should be safe enough to know this could happen and what we could do to prepare. That seems like the ethical thing, that if they're working on it, could they work a little faster? That would be great. It shouldn't take them a year to fix this, and it shouldn't take longer than a year to alert the community. And so I thank you and some of the other social media people who are just making this a thing so people are aware of what's going on.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where, look, we know Dexcom's a sponsor of this podcast. They're supportive of my Mom's Night Out events. But I don't think there's any issue in talking about these kinds of things because they're happening to people and the company's aware of it. This is like when the adhesives were such an issue back in the day. And I know people still struggle, but it's nothing like it used to be. We expect them to make these things better, and I'm sure they will. But to your point, in terms of the public facing part of this, what would you like Dexcom to do? Is this like an app push? Is this like a push notification? Is this something you'd like them to just notify people is a possibility?
I think they have to lay out the case that these things can happen when you travel. It's not their fault if you lose your phone. It's not their fault if your phone was pickpocketed, but their app lives on your phone. So are they complicit? Not really, but it will impact their customers, and they know this. So why not tell them, look, if you're traveling and you are concerned because this can happen, here are some things you can do, and we will correct our documentation immediately so that when you actually read the documentation, if you do, it's in there correctly. We will correct our customer service people to answer correctly on the phone and say, no, these are the solutions that work, so that people can actually make the choice for themselves, how much of a risk they want to take. And it's a risk analysis. Oh, I think I'll be fine. Teresa Hastings, she traveled to Iceland. When she got home, I think it was the next day, her Dexcom app failed and she was back in the US. And it told her to delete the app and reinstall. If she had been in Iceland, she would not have been able to do that. If she followed their instructions, she would have been without her app. So it is failing. They're not talking about that. They're telling people, delete it. It may not be the first thing to do because what she did was just swiped up and started it again and it worked. So let's not immediately delete the app because that might give you a problem. So there's some information that really would help people feel a little safer and not ruin vacations. There's also an issue I've seen on some of the sites with military families, U.S. military families, because they are moved around quite a bit as well. And they too have run into these issues. So let's protect our service people. Let's let people be safer. All it takes is customer service and an awareness that the Dexcom products impact people's lives dramatically. That's all we're asking. Yeah, it would be great if they gave us a G6 and a transmitter for the time we're on vacation, a loaner. I don't know what that takes, and it's probably an act of God, but it would help.
If you kept it sealed that's what they do. Back in the day, Animas pumps and tandem pumps, and the policy generally, and this may vary pump to pump, it's been a while as well. The policy is generally, if you're in a place where we can't overnight you a pump, you're in a remote area camping, you're overseas, you're on a ship, then they will send you along with a vacation backup pump. But if they can overnight you something because you're at grandma's house, they're not giving you a pump. And the pump stays in a sealed box where you're telling your son, do not open that or I will kill you because I'm going to have to pay the company. Give me that, So I wonder, we're all kind of making this up as we go along, right? Thinking, how could we do this? But they could send you something in a sealed package and say, you open it, you may have to pay for it.
And if you don't return it, you may have to.
Right. And right. If you don't return it, you have to pay for it.
Cosmo used to do that. And if you didn't return it after 2 months, they would then bill you. There's another fix, but I'm part of the DIY community, is they could certainly invest in Anubis transmitters that work on the G6, and the battery can be turned off and on. So it can be turned on and then returned to the company. It's the cheapest fix, but that's off label. So you pretend I didn't say that, but
yeah, we're going to just pretend you didn't say that about the Anubis transmitters. We don't even know what that is, and we're not going to go down that road. So don't get me in trouble. But yeah, There are lots of ways that the community, to bring it back, can help. But the real bottom line here is people have to know it can happen before they can even try to help each other out.
And when you hear about this and it feels complicated, that's when you just kind of need to know the easy fix.
Right.
You shouldn't be interrupted on your travel or business trips or military service and have to figure out a glitch in the system.
Yeah. Hey, before I let you go, how's everything going over there in the DIY world, in your world that you've jumped into with both feet?
It is fascinating. It is moving quite a bit along, and it's an amazing community. Loop and Learn has over 11,000 members worldwide, and about 70% are active on a monthly basis. But I'm also getting involved in the topic of type 1 diabetes and aging, and just started an initiative called T1D to 100. And we're doing some documentation issues that we're all concerned about. We're glad we can live longer, but there are issues as we age. Where are we going to live? What happens with our skin as we've used it so extensively? We're getting some validation from the research community on what we're saying. How do you figure out where you're going to live? Because assisted living places don't always take people with type 1 diabetes. So we're trying to help the community plan a little bit and feel a little safer as we age.
Will you please come back and talk to me about that at some point? Get your group together. We could do a round table or something, because that's one of the issues, I kid you not, that keeps me up at night. And my son's only 19.
Yeah.
And, when you think about aging with type 1, it is not just about you all as individuals. As you mentioned, assisted living, caretakers, people have no idea.
No, so we're trying to figure out what we can address. There is an tiny international community looking at this now. And I'm frightened, and I don't want other people to be frightened.
Yeah.
And you lose people, you lose your spouse, you lose your kids don't talk to you, or whatever it is that you're relying on to take care of you. And what is that going to look like? And how do we feel safer? Because we are going to age, and we're doing it in big numbers now.
And so many of you who are aging well with type 1 are such strong individuals. You take care of yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I can imagine the questions that are going on is like, well, when do I have to have some help? And who's this chucklehead who's going to help take care of me?
Yeah, the big word is control. When do I have to give up control?
Yeah.
And it can happen anytime to anyone at any age having to be in a hospital. So we're looking at hospital care as well and how to be prepared. Not everyone likes to be prepared. I understand that. But those who do, we're working on tools.
All right. Well, we'll definitely follow up with you. But Joanne, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this issue. Of course, I will reach out to Dexcom and get a response from them so we can talk about, what the company is doing right now. But hopefully this will be resolved soon. But at the same time, I'm thrilled to be able to provide some information on what to do in the meantime. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Just one quick thing. If you go to Loop and Learn and you type in the search engine geofencing, you'll get the recommendations. So if you didn't catch it on this, it's the different things you can do to be prepared. So we've done documentation on that.
We'll link that up directly. That's fantastic. Joanne, thanks.
Thank you so much, Stacey. I really appreciate your help.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
I will link up more information in the show notes. Lots of great advice here from that Loop and Learn group. Joanne mentioned that. I'll link up the guides. If you are worried about being in this situation, they have good advice about how to prepare and then what to do if it happens. As I said at the beginning of the show, Dexcom had given me a statement, and I will link up more information from them. Here's what they had to say. This is in addition to Jake Leach's comments that I already read, and I will link up more from Dexcom in the show notes. All right, they explained geofencing, what it is. We had already mentioned that. GFC controls, we had already mentioned that, but geofencing or GFC controls are commonly used by companies for regulatory control of product apps. Geofencing will only impact customers who uninstall and reinstall the app while outside of their country of residence from where they initially downloaded the app. Why geofencing was introduced on G7? Dexcom says different countries and regions have approval for different features. Geo-enhanced feature control, GFC, ensures that a customer only sees features within the G7 app that are approved for use in their country of residence. How can people prepare? Dexcom says in the unlikely event that you experience any issues, Here are some tips to help you travel with confidence. If possible, carry some backup sensors in case you experience sensor failure. Travel with a blood glucose meter. If you have a Dexcom receiver, it makes a great backup to your app. Bring its US cable and charger. If necessary, bring a power converter or adapter for the countries you are visiting. And that is Dexcom's statement as of now. We'll keep you posted if anything changes or if I hear from the Loop and Learn folks that they've learned anything new, and hopefully we can be better prepared together. It is still a lot to think about when you travel. So, by the way, before I let you go, I do have a guide to travel with a packing list, and it's free. It's a little printable packing list and a guide to, easy tips to make traveling a little bit easier. That's at diabetes-connections.com. Click on resources. I have a bunch of free downloads there that you may find helpful. All right, thanks to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.
I love when I don't have to deal with a faraway mail order system, when I can just pick up diabetes supplies from the pharmacy. Omnipod is the only tubeless full-feature insulin pump available through the pharmacy. It makes it simple to pick up pods and insulin in the same place, and you avoid those high startup costs from traditional tubed insulin pumps. You simply pay as you pod. Remember, pharmacy means no commitment, and pharmacy means you can switch now, even if your tubed pump is under warranty. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Omnipod logo. For full safety risk information and free trial terms and conditions, visit omnipod.com/diabetesconnections.